Joel, a 24-year-old Nigerian American, had lived most of his life in the United States. Raised in a world far removed from his parents' roots, he embraced Western ideals, shaping his beliefs and lifestyle in ways that troubled him. His parents, who had migrated when he was just 4, had done their best to keep him connected to his Nigerian heritage, but they feared they were losing him. He was moving with a crowd they deemed inappropriate, drifting into a life they believed strayed too far from their values. Concerned about his future, they sought a way to ground him, to toughen him up, and instill a sense of responsibility. Their solution? Sending him back to Nigeria for the National Youth Service Corps (NYSC), a one-year program meant to instill discipline and patriotism in young graduates. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. 72% of our weekly viewers haven't subscribed yet. Subscribing ensures you never miss our latest stories, updates, and exclusive community posts. Join our growing family and stay connected to the best African folktales. Hit the subscribe button now. My friends, welcome back to our channel. Let's start this thought-provoking story. Joel was hesitant. Nigeria was a distant memory, a place he only knew through the stories his parents told. But soon, he found himself stepping off a plane in Calabar, his home state, ready to begin what his parent hoped would be a transformational journey. Joel stepped off the plane, the thick, humid air of Calabar hitting him instantly. The scent of fried plantain, fuel exhaust, and the earth after a morning rain mingled in the air, a sharp contrast to the crisp, conditioned atmosphere of the U.S. airports he was used to. He adjusted his backpack and scanned the waiting crowd. His grandparents stood among them, their faces alight with joy. His grandmother, a petite woman with deep smile lines, pulled him into a tight embrace. "My son, welcome home," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. His grandfather, more reserved but equally pleased, patted his shoulder. "You will see," he said in a firm tone. "This land will teach you what America could not." The drive from the airport to their home was a whirlwind of sights and sounds. Street vendors balancing trays of goods on their heads, yellow tricycles weaving between honking cars, and children running barefoot along red earth roads. Calabar was alive, pulsing with an energy that was both chaotic and captivating. Days later, Joel found himself standing in the midst of a massive, dusty field, surrounded by hundreds of young men and women dressed in the standard NYSC khaki uniform. The 3-week orientation camp had begun. This was the first step of his supposed transformation. Early morning drills, long lectures on patriotism, community service projects, and a strict regimented schedule. The camp was designed to break them down and build them back up as disciplined, unified Nigerians. At first, Joel struggled. Waking up at 4:30 a.m. for parade drills was brutal. The endless speeches about nationalism felt distant from his own reality. The local food, with its heavy spice and unfamiliar textures, tested his patience. But as the days went on, he began to see the camaraderie forming among the Corps members. Despite their different backgrounds, they all shared the same exhaustion, the same struggles, the same jokes whispered during long lectures. Then he met Essay. Confident, outspoken, and effortlessly charming, she stood out from the crowd. Unlike the others who seemed to embrace the system, Essay was different. It was during the evening social gathering, a time when Corps members unwound from the long day of drills, lectures, and community tasks. Music played in the background as small groups formed, laughing, debating, and sharing their frustrations about the camp experience. Joel had been standing near the food stand, shifting from one foot to the other, waiting his turn to grab a plate of rice and stew. The queue was long, and the air smelled of hot oil and pepper. He sighed, adjusting his NYSC cap, when he suddenly felt a light tap on his shoulder. "Can you buy me a plate?" a smooth, confident voice asked. "I don't fancy queuing." Joel turned, caught off guard. The woman standing before him wasn't just anyone. She was striking. Her skin glowed under the dim camp lights, her braids were neatly laid, and she had an air of effortless confidence. She wasn't flustered by the heat, the dust, or the loud chatter of the crowded food stand. Instead, she stood there, cool and composed, counting a stack of crispy 1,000 Nigerian Naira's notes like money was just paper to her. Joel blinked. Yeah, sure." He wasn't about to say no. With a quick nod, he ordered 2 plates, handing the vendor some of the money Essay had casually passed him. As they waited, she smirked. watching him. "You don't look like you belong here," she said, amusement in her tone. Joel chuckled. "That obvious?" She tilted her head. "Very. You're too clean, too fresh. You just got back, didn't you?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Do I really stick out that much? Like a sore thumb?" She leaned in slightly. "Where from?" "New York." She let out a knowing hum. "Figures. I schooled in the UK, but I grew up here. I know Nigeria inside out." Their food arrived, and they moved to an empty bench. Joel couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stumbled into something, or someone, who would change everything. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily. She had a way of talking that made everything sound exciting, effortless. Joel learned her name, Essay, that she was from Delta State, and that despite being here, she had no plans of enduring the typical NYSC struggles. Essay and Joel became inseparable. From the moment they met at the food stand, a natural rhythm developed between them. They spent their free moments together, skipping out on some of the more tedious camp activities, finding ways to make the experience bearable, and sharing their thoughts on life beyond NYSC. One evening, as they sat on a low concrete ledge near the parade ground, Essay turned to Joel with a smirk. "You know, I saw you on the first day," she said. Joel raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah," she nodded. "At registration. The moment you opened your mouth, I knew. IJGB. Joel laughed. "IJGB? What's that?" "I just got back," she said dramatically, mocking his American accent. "You looked so confused, like you accidentally boarded the wrong flight. The way you spoke, walked, even the way you held your documents, screamed fresh off the plane." Joel rolled his eyes. "So, you judged me from a distance?" Essay grinned. "Not judged, just observed." She leaned back, stretching her legs. "You see, I may have schooled in the UK, but I wasn't raised there. I grew up in Nigeria, traveled back and forth a lot. My parents never let me lose my roots. You, on the other hand, you're just discovering yours." Joel thought about that. She wasn't wrong. The past few weeks had been overwhelming, filled with cultural shocks he hadn't anticipated. But Essay moved through it all so effortlessly, like someone who knew exactly how to navigate both worlds. "You don't even act like you were foreign schooled," he noted. "That's the thing," she said, her voice turning serious. "I love the good life, but I know this country inside out. I know what's real, what's fake, and how to get what I want. And trust me, Joel, the people who make it in Nigeria, they don't do it by following the rules." He studied her for a moment, unsure of what to say. "Anyway," she continued, brushing off the moment, "Lagos is where it's at. You'll see what I mean." As their NYSC romance went on, Essay revealed more about herself. She was from an influential family in Delta State, her father a powerful politician, her mother a business oil mogul. She had lived in the UK most of her life, attended elite schools, and now found herself in NYSC, a program she found beneath her. But in Nigeria politics, NYSC is such a big deal. "I have no intention of staying in some rural village," she said. "I'm getting reposted to Lagos." "You should too." As the days in camp passed, Joel found himself drawn deeper into Essay's world. She had an easy charm, a way of making everything seem effortless. Unlike the other Corps members who grumbled about the early morning drills and the regimented routine, Essay floated through it all, untouched by the stress of NYSC life. She always had a way out, a connection, a favor, a shortcut. One evening, as they sat on a low bench near the volleyball court, Essay casually tossed out an idea. "You should come to Lagos with me," she said, watching his reaction. Joel frowned. "Lagos? My posting is already set for Calabar. My parents want me to stay close to home." Essay rolled her eyes. "And do what? Sit under your grandmother's watchful eye while working at some slow government office?" "Lagos is where things happen, Joel. You'll meet the right people, have the right opportunities. It's a different world." He hesitated. "I don't know. My parents already made arrangements." Essay smirked. "That's nothing. I can get you reposted. My family has connections. I know the right people in the ministry. You want it done? Consider it done." Joel didn't answer immediately, but the idea stayed with him. The truth was, Lagos had always intrigued him. The fast-paced city life, the business hubs, the social scene. It sounded a lot more exciting than spending a year in Cross River, under his grandparents' roof. When camp ended, Joel had made up his mind. Using S.A.'s connections, his posting was changed to a government ministry in Lagos. Convincing his parents was another battle. "You don't know Lagos," his mother warned. "It's not like America. It's not even like Calabar." "I'll be fine," Joel assured them. "I have a place to stay. Everything is arranged." His father sighed. "Where exactly will you stay?" Joel hesitated briefly before answering. "The ministry has accommodations." It was a lie. His real accommodation was S.A.'s family home in Ikoyi, a mansion that seemed more like a private resort than a residence. Eventually, his parents relented. They believed this experience would make him stronger, wiser. What they didn't know was that Lagos wouldn't teach Joel discipline. It would push him into a world he never imagined. Joel arrived in Lagos with wide eyes, taking in the chaos and energy that pulsed through the city. The airport had been a whirlwind of noise, movement, and impatient taxi drivers calling out for passengers. As he settled into the back seat of a black SUV that had come to pick him up, he gazed out at the towering buildings, massive billboards, and endless streams of traffic that defined the city. Lagos was nothing like Calabar. It was loud, alive, and relentless. The car pulled into a gated compound in Ikoyi, and Joel stared at the massive house before him. This wasn't just a house, it was a palace. S.A. had mentioned her family's wealth, but seeing it in person was something else. Marble floors, glass chandeliers, a pool, and a private bar. It was the kind of place that made luxury seem ordinary. S.A. greeted him with a drink in hand. "Welcome to Lagos," she said with a mischievous smile. Now the fun begins. Over the next few weeks, Joel was pulled into a lifestyle he had only seen in movies. Parties that stretched into the early hours, fast cars, endless alcohol, and a world where money flowed without question. The exclusivity of it all was intoxicating. Unlike NYSC camp, where rules were enforced, Lagos felt lawless. Anything was possible. It was during one of those nights, lounging by the pool after a club outing, that S.A. casually revealed another side of herself. "You know," she said, stretching lazily, "back in the UK, I had an ex who was deep into the game." "The real game?" Joel raised an eyebrow. "What game?" She grinned. "Crime. The fun kind. Stealing luxury cars, robbing rich kids at clubs, making easy money. And the best part, we never got caught." Joel laughed, thinking she was joking. But S.A.'s eyes held a dangerous glint. "Lagos is even easier," she continued. "No cameras. No real security. People flash money without thinking. You and I, we could make a killing." Joel hesitated. It was reckless, dangerous. But the thrill in S.A.'s voice was infectious. "It's just for fun," she said, leaning in. "No one gets hurt. Just quick cash, easy moves." Joel knew he should say no. But by then, Lagos had already sunk its claws into him. It started like any other night in Lagos. Loud music, flashing lights, and the intoxicating energy of the elite club scene. The venue was packed with wealthy socialites, businessmen, and celebrities, all throwing money around without a second thought. Joel and S.A. blended in seamlessly, dressed to impress, moving through the crowd like they belonged. S.A. leaned in, her lips close to Joel's ear. "Watch and learn," she whispered. Their target was easy to spot. A middle-aged businessman, dressed in a crisp white kaftan, sat at the bar, sipping an expensive bottle of whiskey. His Rolex glimmered under the neon lights, and a pair of car keys, attached to a golden keychain, rested on the counter beside his half-finished drink. He was already swaying slightly, deep in conversation with a group of younger men, his laughter loud and careless. S.A. approached first, all confidence and charm. She slid onto the stool next to him, brushing her fingers against his wrist as she reached for a cocktail napkin. He turned, eyes lighting up at the sight of her. "Hope you don't mind some company," she purred, flashing a flirtatious smile. He didn't. Within minutes, she had him hooked, laughing at his jokes, leaning in just enough to make him feel important. The man barely noticed when she discreetly motioned toward Joel, who had been lingering nearby. That was his cue. Joel moved in casual but swift. As S.A. placed a delicate hand on the businessman's shoulder, drawing his attention toward her, Joel's fingers closed around the car keys. The man didn't even flinch. By the time Joel slipped away toward the exit, the businessman was too busy trying to impress S.A. to realize anything was missing. Outside, the valet barely questioned Joel as he handed over the keys. He simply assumed he was the owner. Within moments, Joel was behind the wheel of a sleek black Mercedes-Benz, maneuvering through the busy streets of Victoria Island, adrenaline pumping through his veins. By the time the businessman realized his car was gone, it was too late. S.A. had excused herself from the conversation, citing a phone call, and disappeared into the crowd. Back at the safe house, Joel tossed the keys onto the table, still catching his breath. S.A. smirked. "Easy money," she said. Joel exhaled. He knew this was wrong. But the rush, the ease of it, was undeniable. And in Lagos, nobody ever got caught, right? The night was thick with Lagos humidity as Joel trailed behind S.A. and her newest target, a foreign businessman, drunk and unaware of what awaited him. He had been throwing money around at the club all night, tipping waiters excessively, and flashing his leather briefcase filled with cash. S.A. had locked in on him the moment she saw the briefcase. The man barely noticed how smoothly she had guided him out of the club and into a waiting cab. By the time they arrived at a high-end boutique hotel in Victoria Island, he was too caught up in his own desires to notice the danger. S.A. had planned everything in advance. Earlier that evening, she had booked the room using a fake ID, ensuring there would be no trace of them when it was over. Inside the suite, the businessman set the briefcase beside the bed and loosened his tie. S.A. poured them drinks, laughing softly as she slid onto his lap, playing her part effortlessly. She leaned in, her fingers grazing his collar, her perfume intoxicating. Then the lights flickered. The man barely had time to react before the door creaked open. A masked figure stepped in, dressed in all black, a pistol glinting in the dim light. "Don't move," Joel's voice came, low and firm behind the mask. The businessman's eyes went wide. He raised his hands instinctively, fear paralyzing him. S.A. moved swiftly, grabbing the briefcase and flipping it open. Stacks of crisp foreign bills, hundreds of thousands in dollars, euros, and pounds, filled the case. She grinned, stuffing the money into her handbag while Joel kept his weapon trained on the man. Take it all. Just don't hurt me," the man pleaded, sweat forming on his brow. S.A. smirked. That was always the plan. She moved to the bed, yanking the sheets free. Within moments, the businessman was tied up, his hands bound behind his back, a gag shoved into his mouth. "You'll be found in the morning," S.A. whispered. "If you're smart, you won't say a word." Joel gave one last glance before they slipped out, vanishing into the Lagos night. The man, still trembling, stared at the ceiling in silence, knowing this was a story he could never tell. The evening sky dimmed as darkness crept over the lonely stretch of road. The city lights were far behind, leaving only the distant hum of traffic and the occasional rustling of leaves in the evening breeze. It was the perfect spot, no witnesses, no security cameras, just another quiet Lagos road where anything could happen. S.A. stood by the hood of her sleek SUV, dressed in a striking red gown that shimmered under the faint glow of the streetlights. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she moved, bending over the bonnet as though inspecting a problem she had no intention of fixing. Minutes passed before the headlights of an approaching car appeared. S.A. straightened, waving one hand with just enough urgency to signal distress while keeping her expression perfectly composed. The car slowed, then stopped. A young man stepped out, dressed sharply, exuding the quiet confidence of someone who had never had to second-guess his surroundings. He looked at S.A., then at the empty road. "Madam, you shouldn't be stuck here alone." "This place isn't safe," he said. S.A. sighed, brushing her hair back dramatically. "Tell me about it." "My car just stopped, and I have no idea why." She motioned to the open bonnet. "Do you mind taking a quick look?" The man hesitated but eventually nodded, leaving his car engine running as he walked over. As he bent over to inspect the supposed issue, the man barely had time to register the confusion before a voice cut through the silence behind him. "Don't move." He stiffened. Joel stepped out of the shadows, a black mask covering his face, his grip steady on the gun aimed at the man's chest. "Take off your clothes." The man swallowed hard. "What?" Joel cocked the gun. "Everything." Now, shaking, the man hesitated but soon stripped down to his boxers, standing humiliated in the chilly night air. S.A. smirked, smoothing her gown before climbing into her perfectly functional SUV. The engine purred to life because, of course, it had never been broken. With a satisfied chuckle, she sped away. Joel, sliding into the driver's seat of the stolen car, aims the gun at the man. He looks around in quick succession to be sure they still had no company. With one last glance at his stranded victim, he revved the engine and sped into the darkness, leaving behind nothing but a man too stunned to move. The air in Lagos was thick with tension as Joel sat in S.A.'s dimly lit living room, staring at the glass of whiskey in his hand. The thrill of their past heists had faded, replaced by an uneasy weight in his chest. His service year was almost over, and soon he would be on a flight back to the U.S., leaving Nigeria and everything that had happened here behind. But S.A. had other plans. She perched on the armrest of his chair, her hand trailing lazily down his arm. "One last job," she whispered. "After this, we're done." Joel exhaled sharply. "S.A., I don't know. This isn't what I signed up for. You're acting like we haven't done this before." Her voice was soft but firm. "This is different," he muttered. S.A. leaned in closer, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "My intel is solid. The target is very high profile, and we'll be moving around with serious cash on Thursday next week. We're talking hard currency, no messy transfers, no paper trail. All in the car. We take it, we disappear." He rubbed his face, torn between logic and the pull of her persuasion. She sighed, sensing his hesitation. "Joel, listen. My mom wants me clean. She's already talking about sending me to another rehab. If we do this, I can walk away with something. We can walk away together." Joel frowned. "Rehab?" S.A. nodded. "She's serious this time. She wants me out of this life. And honestly, maybe I do too." She took his hand, squeezing it. "I love you, Joel. If you stay, we can make something real. My dad has political connections. You wouldn't have to struggle for anything here." Joel stared at her, heart pounding. A life in Nigeria? Politics? It was a far cry from the life he had planned. But before he could answer, S.A. smiled, playing her final card. "This is our last one," S.A. repeated, her voice dripping with certainty. "No more after this. We need this for our passing out. One final night to paint the clubs red." She leaned back, twirling the glass in her hand, watching Joel closely. He could see it in her eyes. She had already made up her mind. This wasn't a question. It was a plan. "Think about it," she continued. "You return to the U.S., get your life sorted. I go to rehab, clean up for real this time. And when I'm back, we do Lagos, right?" Joel exhaled, conflicted. "My mom already knows about you," S.A. added, a small smile playing on her lips. "She knows you're the love of my life. If you choose to, we could even get married. Marriage, Lagos, a future he had never imagined. But first, the heist. One last job, one last night, and then maybe a new beginning." He stared at her, heart pounding. Still, when S.A. extended her hand, he took it. "All right," he murmured. One last job. The night air was thick with anticipation as Joel gripped the steering wheel, his pulse racing. The plan had been simple, quick, clean, no unnecessary risks. S.A. had done the groundwork. Their target was a wealthy woman known for carrying large sums of cash, and their information was solid. She would be alone, distracted, and easy to overpower. Everything unraveled in seconds. They had followed her black SUV from a luxury hotel, waiting for the perfect moment. As she slowed down near a quieter road, S.A., dressed in black, stepped into the street, waving desperately. Just as predicted, the woman slowed down, lowering her window in concern. That was all the opportunity they needed. Joel rushed forward, gun drawn. "Get out of the car." The woman gasped, hands trembling. But instead of compliance, she hesitated. eyes darting toward her phone. S.A., impatient, yanked open the door, grabbing at her purse. Then it happened. A struggle. A scream. The gun went off. Joel's hand shook as the woman slumped to the side, a red stain spreading across her blouse. S.A.'s eyes widened in horror before she grabbed Joel's wrist. "We have to go." Joel's mind raced. "We take the car." "No," S.A. snapped. "It's too hot now. We leave it." But Joel, panicking, yanked the wounded victim to the curb, jumped into the driver's seat. He sped off, hands slick with sweat, heart hammering in his chest. S.A. vanished into the shadows. The plan had been simple. Terrify the woman into surrendering the car, take the vehicle and the cash inside, and disappear. No harm, no chaos, just a clean getaway. Joel would drive the stolen SUV while S.A. followed behind in their tailing car, ensuring no one caught onto them before the vehicle was delivered to their agent, who would smuggle it across the border to Cotonou, Benin Republic. But things had gone horribly wrong. S.A. had vanished. The moment the gun went off, she had bolted into the night, her silhouette disappearing like a ghost. Joel had no idea where she had gone, and she wasn't answering his calls. That wasn't part of the plan. But instead of running, he convinced himself that staying put was the best option. He knew nothing about Lagos apart from their Ikoyi apartment. It wasn't like he could just start roaming the streets looking for her. So he waited. 2 days passed, and still no word from S.A. No text, no calls, no signal. Panic gnawed at his thoughts. He began to rationalize. Maybe it was for the best. He would keep the money from the heist, disappear, and book the next flight back to the U.S. for good. No more crime, no more risks, just a fresh start. It should have been that easy. What Joel didn't know was that the suitcase containing the stolen money had a tracker embedded in it. S.A. must have known. She would have gotten rid of it immediately. But Joel? He had no idea. He had left it sitting there, hidden in a closet, thinking he had all the time in the world. By the time the police kicked down the door, it was already too late. The first thing Joel heard was the crack of the wood as his front door splintered. Then came the deafening shouts. "Hands where we can see them." On the ground. His body moved before his brain could process what was happening. He tried to reach for his phone, maybe call S.A. one last time, but before his fingers even grazed the screen, a rough hand yanked him backward, slamming him onto the cold tile floor. Handcuffs snapped around his wrists. The room blurred. The weight of the situation finally crashed down on him. S.A. was gone. The police had him. And this time, there was no way out. The air in the Nigerian police cell was thick with sweat, filth, and despair. Joel sat on the hard concrete floor, his back pressed against the damp, peeling walls, staring blankly ahead. The stench of urine and unwashed bodies filled his nostrils, a constant reminder that he was no longer in control of his life. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of cramped spaces, sleeping on the cold ground, surviving on watery porridge and stale bread. 3 weeks of listening to the moans of fellow detainees, some of whom had been here for months, years even, without trial. The guards were merciless, barking orders and delivering beatings for the smallest infractions. Joel, once sheltered by privilege, was now just another prisoner, stripped of dignity, stripped of everything. And for what? Girl. A thrill. A life he was never meant to live. For the first time, he had nowhere to run, no escape plan, just the crushing weight of his own recklessness. He thought about his parents, how they had sent him here to find his roots, to build character. Now, all they would remember was their son's mugshot on the news. Unbeknownst to him, S.A. had confessed everything the night of the crime. Overwhelmed by guilt and panic, she had broken down to her parents, revealing the heist and the shooting. Her father, a powerful politician, knew immediately that they had to erase any trace of her involvement. His first command, no communication with Joel. If she reached out, they would both be doomed. It was bad enough that the stolen money had been traced to a senator's apartment in Ikoyi. The weight of the scandal was pressing on all sides. Meanwhile, Joel's grandparents, devastated by the news, rushed to Lagos, pleading with lawyers, bribing whoever would listen, desperately trying to secure his bail. The case had drawn attention, but the victim miraculously survived. This gave S.A.'s father an opening. Using his influence, he pressured the right officials, smoothed over the political mess, and ultimately had the charges against Joel dropped. 3 weeks after his arrest, just in time for the NYSC passing out ceremony, Joel was released. He stepped out of the cell a free man, but he felt nothing like the person who had walked into Lagos months ago. He had come to Nigeria to find himself. Instead, he had lost everything. Joel sat in silence, staring at the cityscape from his parents' hotel window. Lagos, once a playground of adventure and excitement, now felt like a prison. He had walked out of police detention a free man, but nothing about him felt free. The past weeks had changed him in ways he never imagined. His parents, once firm believers that Nigeria would fix him, now looked at him with a hollow regret of people who had made an irreversible mistake. They were furious, not just at him, but at themselves. Their first decision was absolute. No more S.A. That girl is poison, his mother said, pacing. She led you into destruction, and you still think about her? Joel clenched his fists. S.A. had vanished as soon as he was arrested. No texts, no calls. She let him take the fall alone, and yet he couldn't shake the memories of their time together and the future plan to do Lagos right. He had believed she loved him. But how could someone who loved him disappear when he needed her most? Meanwhile, S.A.'s parents wasted no time in damage control. They whisked her away to a high-end rehabilitation center abroad. According to the What Joel parents gathered from the senator's representative, she was getting the help she needed. But Joel knew better. S.A. had always done what she needed to survive, and this was just another move on the chessboard. Joel's parents had sent him to Nigeria to make him strong, to reconnect him with his roots. They had believed that taking him away from Western influences would protect him from a wayward life. But here he was arrested, branded as a criminal, nearly losing everything. And where had it happened? Not in America, but in the very place they thought would save him. The realization stung. Their fears of Western corruption had blinded them to the truth. That danger, temptation, and bad decisions existed everywhere. The problem had never been geography. It had been choices. And choices could be bad no matter where one lived. With heavy hearts, they booked his flight back to the U.S., vowing to take full control of his future. As the plane took off, Joel stared out the window, feeling the weight of everything he was leaving behind. Nigeria was supposed to change him. And in a way, it did. Just not the way anyone expected. Friends, you've reached the end of this video. See you in the next one. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do so. You don't want to miss our community posts and updates.